We're starting Be'ezus Hashem, the 12th Sefer, which is called Sefer Kinyan. The Rambam, every Sefer starts off with a pasuk, B'Shem Hashem Kel Elam, Reishis Chochma Knei Chochma, B'chol Kinyancha Knei Bina. It's a pasuk of Mishlei. Rashi over there teaches Reishis Chochma Knei Chochma. First, a person is supposed to buy Chochma from a Malamed. He's supposed to go and get Chochma, even if it means paying money for it, to get Chochma from someone from Mechirah. And then B'chol Kinyancha Knei Bina. Once you received Chochma from Mechirah, so now you have to be Mizbein or Lahavin Dover Mitech Dover in the Chochma which you received Mechirah. Sefer Shnei Moser v'hu Sefer Kinyan. Hilches of Chomish v'zeu Siduran, Hilches Mechirah, Hilches Chio Matana, Hilches Shchenim, Hilches Shluchim v'Shutfin, and Hilches Avodim. And as we mentioned that in the Rambam, the Meduyik Dikar Rambams, so over here the Rambam mentions in all of them, he mentioned Hilches Mechirah, the mitzvahs which are connected to it, Hilches Chio Matana, Hilches Shchenim, he lists off all the mitzvahs which are connected to all the halachas, and then the Rambam starts again, going through with Hilchas Mechirah, again mentioning the mitzvahs, and then starting the halachas that are in Hilchas Mechirah. Maybe just a little ha'ara that the Rambam divides. There's Hilchas Mechirah, and then there's Hilchas Chio Matana. There will be a mokum to think that L'chura, Matana and Mechirah have a similarity, that they're by both of them there's a das makna. So by Mechirah you're getting paid for it, and by Matana you're not getting paid for it. But L'chura there's a similarity that there's a das makna. Masha'inkin by Schia there's no das makna. But on the other end, Schia and Matana have a similarity that they're both, you're getting something without money. So in other words, the similarity of Hilchas Chio Matana is that they're both of them without money. You know, here you're being Zeichem and a Hefker, and here you're receiving a Matana. In Mechirah, it's with money. So, but I'm saying L'chura, there will be a mokim that Mechirah and Matana is a similarity that is Das Makna. Vice is the fact that Schio and Matana are both without money, that overweighs that similarity, Legabe the similarity between Matana and Mechirah. That's L'chura the Pashtus Hadvarim. We see something similar. The Rambam in Sefer Mishpatim starts with Hilchas Chirus, and then he starts with Hilchas She'elo Pikodin. Now in Hilchas Chirus he starts with the Dalit Shemrim, and he speaks about the Dalit Shemrim. So the Dalit Shemrim, Shemer Chinam, Shemer Sochar, and a Secher and a Sheil. So these are the Dalit Shemrim. Lepeil, in Hilchas Chirus, the Rambam speaks about a Shemer Sochar and a Secher. And in Hilchas She'elo Pikodin, he only speaks about a Sheil and a Shemer Chinam. In other words, he divided the Shemrim. He didn't speak about all the Shemrim in one halacha. The dinim of a Sheil and a Shemer Chinam, he speaks in Hilchas She'elo Pikodin. The dinim of a Shemer Socher and a Secher, he speaks in Hilchas Chirus. And Hilchas Chirus, he doesn't only speak about the Shemrim, those two Shemrim, he speaks about the clothes, the din of Hilchas Chirus. That when you're Secher someone, you have to pay him, and B'yema, all these dinim that are dinim being Secher, and also Behema being Secher, all the dinim of a Secher, including Shemer Socher and a Secher, is all in Hilchas Chirus, and the Hilchas Shemrim of a Sheil and a Shemer Chinam, that's in Hilchas She'elo Pikodin. So he divided the Shemrim. And the Pashtos, the Pashtos Advarim is that in She'elo Pikodin is both talking about where two people have a connection but without money. There's no money there. Whereas the She'el borrowed the item, he's not paying for it. And Al-Derazeh, the Shemer Chinam, is watching the item and he's not paying for it. And in that Indian, they're both similar. Masha'inkin by Schirus, there's always money. There's either you're paying to hire the item, or someone's paying you in order to watch the item, or someone's paying you in order to work. So in that prat, there's similar. So that's how the division is. Notice Hilchas Chirus are where you have a relationship with someone that you're being paid for. Either you're paying to use the item, or you're being paid to work, or you're being paid to watch. Masha'inkin She'elo Pikodin is you're dealing with someone and no one's getting paid. Not the She'el is paying the Mashal, and not the Mafkid is paying the Shemer Chinam. And the Rambam put these two together. So I'm just saying as comparison, that over here, just like over there, the Rambam put together those that don't pay, and he's divided the ones that don't pay and the ones that pay. So over here also, the Rambam divides Hilchas Mechirah and Hilchas Chio Matana, just an observation. Hilchas Mechirah yesh b'chlolan chomish mitzvahs. Achas mitzvahs hasei, ba'arba mitzvahs leisaseh v'zeu proten. Aleph, din mekach umemker. Beis shele yoyna b'mekach umemker. This is the din of Einoah. of Mekach Umemka, which they know could be both ways. Side that the Lekech shouldn't be Ma'ana the Meicher, side the Meicher not the Lekech, and Gimel Shalayoyna B'Dvarim, which Be'emes is like, the din of Einos Dvarim is like causing someone, hurting someone with Dvarim. That's L'chura the din of Einos Dvarim, hurting someone with Dvarim, which sounds more like Hilchas Deis. Lepel, the Rambam puts it together in Hilchas Mechirah. And we'll see really Behemshech that a ger could be able just through a Einos Dvarim, through a Einos Moment, he'll be able Sayin Einos Moment and Sayin Einos Dvarim. So look, there's a connection between Einos Moment and Einos Dvarim, and that's why the Rambam puts it together. Look, the pashtus you would have to understand. L'chura, it's completely separate in Yonim. This is a din in Hilchas Mamonis that you're taking away Mammon Shleik Din. And over here, it's a din of hurting someone. You're saying something to someone which is hurtful. You have to understand the connection between Einos Mammon and Einos Dvarim. But I'll call upon they're both in Hilchas Mechirah, Beis Shaliyena B'Mekach Umemker, and Gimel Shaliyena B'Dvarim, Daled Shaliyena Ger Tzedek B'Mamena, you shouldn't hurt him with his mammon, and Hey Shaliyena B'Dvarim, you shouldn't hurt him with Dvarim. Ubir Mitzvaselu B'Prokamelu, Perikrish. Hamekach Einei Nikne B'Dvarim. Just saying that I want to buy something, or we make up that I'm buying something, that doesn't constitute a mekach. Afilu hi'idu aleim edim. There's edim there. Kesad, bayi zani mechelecha, yayin zani mechelecha, evet zani mechelecha, upasku adam. They made up how much money you're going to pay. And v'rotza lekech, and the lekech was masking v'omer kanisi, and v'rotza mecher v'omer macharti. And va'omru le'edim havu alai edim shemacher zeh v'shalakach zeh. No, they make up with each other. I bought it, agaret. And the mecher says also agaret, I sold it. And then he turns to the edim and says, you should be edim that I sold something and he bought it. Is nevertheless harei zeh eine klum. Whereas making up together b'dvarim doesn't constitute a kinyan. Uki'ilu le'hoyu b'neim dvarim me'elam. V'chein b'neisen matana u'mekablam, a person makes up that he's giving a matana, and the other one says, yeah, I'm receiving the matana, and there's edim there. All of this doesn't happen unless there was a ma'aseh kinyan. There has to be a ma'aseh kinyan, an expression of wanting to be makna, and wanting to be koina, and wanting to make up a deal, even in front of edim, and telling the edim, havu alai edim, that we made up this deal. That's nothing. Aval halacha beis, aval im nikna hamekach. Which we'll learn Behemshech, what are the darkei kinyonim. So then it's kana lekech through the darkei kinyonim. The lekech was kana ve'ein tzrichem le'edem klal ve'ein echad mem yochel achzveres. It's both ways. In other words, b'dvarim it doesn't help even with edem, and with a ma'aseh kinyan it helps even without edem. Now the pashtus advarim sounds like the ma'aseh kinyan. That's the way you acquire something. In other words, Chazal told us how you make an acquisition. You make an acquisition through a ma'aseh kinyan. Through dibur, that's not how you make an acquisition. You have to have a ma'aseh kinyan in order to be kinyan. That would be the pashtus. There's some achreinim that taina that be'emes the ikar acquisition is be'emes done through gmiras das. It's not like the ma'aseh kinyan is really what's making the kinyan. What's making the kinyan is the gmiras das of the mecher and of the kena. However, and therefore there are certain things that when Chazal knew that in these inyanim there's a gmiras das even without a ma'aseh kinyan, so the gmiras das could create a kinyan. It's just that Chazal said that the only way there's a real gmiras das if there was a ma'aseh kinyan. In other words, even if a person says something in front of Adam, that's not really a real gmiras das. And when a person makes a ma'aseh kinyan, even without edim, so then that is a gmiras das. That's there's a rate about it, and achreinim they talk about it, bring rayas to it, and people argue about it. But I'll call upon them, they were learning the pashtus that the Rambam is saying over here, that ein hamekach ein nikne b'dvarim, by expressing that I want to sell something, the other person expressing that he wants to buy it, and even there's edim there that are saying, that he's saying to the edim, that you should be edim, that this is what I want to do, and there's a klora gmiras das. Nevertheless, since there was no ma'aseh kinyan, so there's no kinyan. Masha'en kinyan, if there was a ma'aseh kinyan, even if it was done shalei b'fnei edim, nevertheless it is a kinyan. Halachi gimel ubameh yikna hamekach. So how is a mekach nikna? So it depends. There's different things. There's karkois and there's avodim and there's metaltalim and metaltalim gufa. There's kamadvarim, like we'll learn behemshach. Hakarkois, in order to be koine karka, it's be'echad mishleisha dvarim. Bekesef, a bishtar, a bechazaka. These are the three kinyonim that you're koine karka. Halacha Dalet. Ketzad bekesef, mocher li bayis, mocher li soda, and v'nosn li adam, he gave him the domim for the bayis or the soda, is kona. Now, the Lashon Rambam is nosn li adam. As you do it, there's a big machlekes achreinim. What's the gather of kinyan kesef? Is the gather of kinyan kesef paying for the item? In other words, Pshat, since we're talking about a sale, so the gather of kinyan kesef is I'm paying for the item. And even let's say you didn't pay all the money that the item was worth, but since you started paying for the item, there was like a partial payment. That's why. So that's the Ma'aser Kinyan. The Ma'aser Kinyan is the payment for the item or the partial payment for the item. That's one way of learning it. Memela lefiza, it'll come out that Lamoshel, if you want to do a Ma'aser Kinyan of kesef with a matana, and by matana beferish, there's no money, you're not getting the money, but I'm using the money in order to make a Ma'aser Kinyan. So money is not a Ma'aser Kinyan. Money is only, the kinyan of money is because I'm paying for the item, the domim, that's the gather. Nosli adam, he paid for the item. The way kesef works is, since the lekeach paid the meicher for the item, so therefore the meicher is being makna the item to the lekeach. That's how some learn. And others argue, the Nesivos argues, and the Taz argues, and he says that no, that the gather of kesef is not the paying for the item. The gather of the kesef is the Ma'aser Kinyan. It's a Ma'aser Kinyan. Just like there's a Ma'aser Chlipen, so there's a Ma'aser Kinyan of giving kesef. And Mele Lefiza, also by Matana, you can make a Ma'aser Kinyan. In other words, I'm giving kesef, Ma'aser Kinyan of kesef, and through it I'm making a Ma'aser Kinyan, even though Lepel, it's not domim, because Lepel, I don't owe you any money for the item. But nevertheless, by giving you the kesef for the item, so that's a Ma'aser Kinyan for the item. That's a diun, the gather of Kinyan kesef. Let's read again. Kesef bekesef, mocheli bayis, mocheli soda, v'nosnli adam, he gave him the money, the pashta touch, the domim, sounds like the payment for the item, is kona. That kesef itself is kena, without anything else. The mokim she'en kesun sashtar. If it's a place where it's not regular to write a shtar, so in other words, you could buy a piece of karka and not get a shtar. This is the lekeach won't get a shtar, and still that's considered a sale. It's regular for someone to buy a piece of karka without a shtar. In a place where it's regular that when you buy a karka, you get a shtar mecher. It's regular to write a shtar mecher to someone that buys a piece of karka. Is leikona, so the lekeach is not kena until the meicher writes the shtar. Until the meicher writes the shtar, only then is he kena. Now the Kesef understands that it means achi yichtiv is a shtar. Then Lemafrei was kena with kesef. Not pshat the shtar is going to be kena. Pshat is he's going to have a shtar raya. So you have to have achi yichtiv is a shtar, and only then will the kesef be kena Lemafrei. But lepel you be kena b'shas. You wrote you already gave the kesef. That's number one. And also, some achreinim, gdele achreinim, say that achi yichtiv is a shtar doesn't mean that you have to get the shtar. It means that there was the ksiva and the chsim of the shtar. If there was a ksiva and the chsim of a shtar, so then as long as there's a shtar ready to be given to the lekeach, and the lekeach already gave kesef, so memela the lekeach is kedem. Is nochamal. There's a kinyan called kesef. So when the lekeach gives domim, so he was kedem bekesef. B'mokim shedarkon, that they get a b'mokim shekesun sashtar shedarkan lichtiv shtar mecher, so you're not kena with kesef ad sheyichtiv is ashtar, and we're saying that once your kesef is ashtar, so you're kena. That's what Kesef Mishnah says. You're kena with the kesef l'mafreya, and also lav davka that you have to give the shtar according to some achreinim. You don't have to actually give the shtar as long as the shtar is ready to be given. So then you're kena with the kesef. Halacha base. Hisna lekeach v'omer imrat sisi ekne bekesef ve'ekne b'shtar. The lekeach wants to have the option. Either he should buy bekesef, or he should wait until he gets the shtar. He wants to have that option. And v'nosen ha'kesef al t'nai zeh is arizekayim. And therefore, because the lekeach said this option is eina mecher yochel lazer b'mipnei atnai. The mecher eina yochel lazer b'mipnei atnai. So in other words, be'etzem could be we're talking about in a place where normally it's taka you give a shtar. So therefore, normally the mecher wasn't chal until the shtar came. But nevertheless, since the lekech made up imratzisi ekne bekesef, v'imratzisi ekne b'shtar, so the lekech has the right to decide that he's ekne bekesef, and that right takes away the right from the lekech, from the mecher. So in other words, Eina Mecher Yochel Lazbe Pnei Atmai, aber weil Lekech Yochel Lazbe, Achir the Veis Ashtar. So he remains with that right. So the Lekech could create, even in a matzav. This is even in a matzav, the Pashtus Advarim, is where normally both of them could have had charata before there was a star, because it's makom shekesun star, but the lekech can make a tnai know that this is going to be only I'm going to have the right to be chayzer bay, and you don't have the right to be chayzer bay. And v'chenim hisna mecher kazeh, the other way. If the mecher made up that I want to retain the right to be chayzer until there's a star, but you're not going to have that right. So that would be even in a place where normally they don't have a star. The Bach writes that in other words, once they make up a t'nai amongst themselves, so therefore we don't rechazich with what's going on generally. Generally when you have a stam akinyan, so now a stam akinyan kesef works in a place where there's no shtaris, and in a place where normally there's no gemiras das until there's a star. You have to wait until there's a star. That's all talking about garnish ageret. Masha'inkin, if there was a clear upmach, and the upmach was that only the lekech should have a right, so then only the lekech has a right, and if the clear upmach was only that the mecher has a right, so only the mecher has a right. And then vice versa, it's not totally what the minig hamokim is, whether yek kes nishtar or not kes nishtar. Halacha vov. Ha'imel lechaveri, 10 monu lepleni, v'yikne beisi lecho. In other words, he's the moicher, so normally the lekeach has to give the moicher the money in order to buy the field. Here, the moicher is telling the lekeach, give the money to someone else. He has a designated person that he wants him to give the money to, and through the fact that he gave the money to that person, that the moicher instructed him to give it, it's as if he gave it to him, and now the moicher sells his field to the lekeach. Who's the lekeach? The lekeach is the person that gave the money to that person that the mecher designated. And that we learn out from the din on Arav, just like by an Arav, when you give money, because the Arav instructed you to give money, so the Arav becomes responsible towards the noisin, towards the malva. So Aldera is over here. The mecher, the Gedra Kinyonim is that the mecher received something, and Memele, he's obligated to give something back for what he received. That's how the gather of Kinyan Kesef works by Pashtos. What did the Meicher receive? So normally the Meicher received money, so he has to give back the karka for this money. Over here, he didn't actually receive the money. Someone else received the money. But that person received the money on his instructions. It's as if the Meicher received the money. That's the Havanas Hadvar. Allah Chavov, Nachamo. He'emel Chavere 10 money lepleni, v'yikne beisi lecha, my house will be nikna to you. Ikivin Shenosan, once the buyer gives the money to that other person that the seller designated, is Kana Habayas, so then the buyer buys the house. B'dinarav, that's based on dinarav, like we had B'negei Isha. The same idea, B'negei Isha, marrying an Isha, also you could be Kana B'dinarav. 10 money lepleni, the Isha tells the Baal, give money to someone else, and this Isha will become his wife. That's the din. So we spoke about Kesef, that there's a din of Kesef, that you have to give the domim, at least a pruta, and sometimes you also need a star. Halacha zayin, ketzad b'shtar, kesef le'ala niyor, e'ala cheres, e'ala olo, sodi nesuna lecha, sodi mechura lecha, kivin she'higia shtar liyodi kona. Afal pi she'en sham edem klal, the mere fact that he gave him this star, which says sodi mechura lecha, is kaina. Afal pi she'en ashtar shava klum. So even though it has no value, the star, but nevertheless he writes in the star, sodi mechura lecha, he is kaina. Medvar mamurim, that you're koine just with a star, is b'mecher sodei mepnei rasa. So then just giving such a star would be koine. Aval b'shar karkois, but a regular piece of karka where you're not being mecher mepnei rasa, so we assume that you don't really want to give this karka away unless you get paid for it. Is aval pi she'igia star shel mecher liyodei, v'afilo yi be'edim, is nevertheless leikona, the lekech is not kaina at she'itnes adam. So in other words, because we assume that the moicher doesn't want to really give away the karka unless he got paid for it already. When he's moicher sodei mipnei rasa, so we assume he wants to give away the karka, he wants him to own the karka, and now he should owe him the money for it. Masha'inka, when he's not moicher sodei mipnei rasa, the stam das is that the moicher doesn't want to be makna the karka until the lekeh pays for it. So it comes out as that when you give a regular star, when you give a star, so you give a proper star, when you give a star, even a star makes no difference if you give a star with Edom or without Edom, either way. If you're selling Tzodei Mipnei Rasa, If you're saying Sodem Pnei Rasa, so then the shtar is koina without domim, without money. Masha'inkin, if you're not selling Sodem Pnei Rasa, you have to pay all the pashtas achit and sadom. You have to pay all the money. Now, since the kinyan was a kinyan shtar, the kinyan is not chal until the person pays all the money for the item. That's talking about when the kinyan was a kinyan shtar. Fakert, when the kinyan was, so it comes out, a shtar could work on its own by Mechirah Sodem Pnei Rasa. If it's not Mechirah Sodem Pnei Rasa, it works, but on the condition that there's also domim. Now, by fakert, when we're talking about when you're selling with kesef, so it's fakert. If your person gives kesef, so if it's a mokim she'en kesef shtar, so the kesef itself is kena. The kesef itself is kena. Masha'en in a place where kesef shtar, so it's not enough to have the kesef. You also have to have the shtar. That's the way it works. So in other words, and then the kesef was kena, just a pruta. In other words, when you use the kesef for when you use the kesef for a ma'aseh kinyan, so you can use the kesef for a ma'aseh kinyan, and that kesef ma'aseh kinyan could work even with a pruta, but on the condition that it's not a makom shekes shtar. If it's a makom shekes shtar, so you need a shtar as well. And then we said before that when you have a shtar, so it could be even if you didn't give the shtar, as long as you already wrote the shtar, and then even when you give the shtar, so it goes l'mafreh from the kesef. And the ma'aseh kinyan was the kesef, and it's just that sometimes you need a t'nai that you need a shtar, and also that not that the shtar has to actually use as a ma'aseh kinyan. You have to have a shtar in order that there should be a smichas das. That's when you're doing a kinyan with kesef. Well, here's fakert. You're doing a kinyan with shtar. So for a kinyan with shtar to work, is if you're Mechirah Sodem Pnei Rasa, so the kinyan of shtar itself works. Masha'inkin, if you're not Mechirah Sodem Pnei Rasa, so the kinyan of shtar works only on the condition that the domim was paid. And over here, the domim means the full domim, the entire money. That's how it comes out the difference. If you can have a kinyan kesef, and the t'nai is you have to have a shtar, and you can have a kinyan shtar, but the t'nai is you have to have kesef, but it's different. When you have a kinyan kesef and t'nai is shtar, so a kinyan kesef is done with a pruta, and the t'nai is that there should be a shtar, and lav dafka, that the shtar should actually be biyad halekech. Masha'inkin, when you have a kinyan shtar, so obviously the shtar has to be biyad halekech. There's the kinyan shtar, but if it's not Mechirah Sodem Pnei Rasa, so the t'nai is that you have to give the full value of the item, the full value of the item. Now, this din that you can give a shtar, and even though there's no edom in the shtar, the question is, that person has now a shtar, but l'churi has nothing. He has a piece of paper that says that it says that he gave the money. So it's brought down that the pshat is over here, since it's written b'ksav yodei. There's no edom on it, but lapel, he signed it on it, or there's the ksav yad of the moicher. So it's not like the buyer doesn't have anything. In other words, the question is, if a person, let's say someone else will write the shtar. Someone will write the shtar, sodi shel pleini mechura lecha, and without any edim. An eidechad someone writes the shtar, from the person writes the shtar, a goy writes the shtar. And now the moicher goes ahead and gives the shtar to the lekech. So the lekech lechura has nothing. So b'chiyah gavna, would that also be a kinyan shtar, or a kinyan shtar is only when the lekech has in his hand some type of a raya that the karka is his? So I mean, the achreinim learn over here pshat, that the pshat is that we're not talking, since the lashon is kosivle ala niyara lacheres, the pshat is there was a ksav yad, his ksav yad, either it was his ksav yad or it was his chsima. So it's the lekeach is walking away with something. It's not like there's just a piece of paper and he's giving him a note, which that note he can't do anything. He has some type of a document, not a document of edim. He has a document al kopon of the ksav yad of the lekeach. Halacha ches. So we learned about kesef and we learned about shtar. Now, it said three ways. It's kesef, shtar, and chazaka. Kesef b'chazaka, mocheli bayis, mocheli soda, ishanosa isen matona, is kiven shenoal a goder reports kolshu, which the Rambam is going to tie choice. These what's noal goder reports mean. Behu sheyel b'maisav, he accomplished something with the noal goder reports. So then harei zekona. Harizakana, he's koine. So you're koine with chazaka, making a chazaka on the karka, and chazaka on the karka was null. Either you closed it, or goder, you made a gate around it, or parrots, you mean you opened the gate, you opened the opening, we'll soon see. The hushiyel b'maisav, and you accomplished something which you're null goder or parrots, so then is harizakana. But medvar mamurim, that a chazaka could work, is only Kshehirzik B'fnei HaMechirah HaNesin. Either he made the chazaka in front of the Mechirah HaNesin, or the Mechirah and the Nesin made up that I'm going to sell you the item, or I'm going to give you the item, and then the buyer or the recipient of this matana went ahead and made a Maisik Kinyan of chazaka in front of the Mechirah, or in front of the Nesin. Aval Shalei B'fnei HaMechirah HaNesin, in order for a Maisik chazaka to work, Shalei B'fnei HaMechirah HaNesin is Sarach Sheyemele Lechazek Uknei. It's not enough that he made a Maisa Kinyan, a Maisa Chazaka. It has to be that the Noisin or the Meicher told him, Lech Chazek Uknei. And only Vacharkach, only after he told him, Lech Chazek Uknei, Im Hirzikon Afal Pi She'ena B'fnei HaBailim. In order for it to work, Shalei B'fnei HaBailim, it has to be that the Bailim told him, Lech Chazek Uknei. Now, Hamecher Bayis Lechaveru Moselef Smaftech, and he gave him the key to the house. Is so then is Harezik Mishamal Lechazek Uknei. So it's not a Maisa Kinyan. The Maftech is not a Maisa Kinyan, but giving the Maftech is as if he told him Lechazek Uknei. V'chein Hamecher is Haber. Someone sells someone a bear. Is Kivin Shemosel Idolya. He gave him the bucket, the pail, which you draw the water from the bear. Is Harezik Mishamal Lechazek Uknei, and therefore Kshehirzik Yikna. So B'kitzur, there's a Maisa Chazaka. Chazaka is no al Gadar Uparatz. And now we're learning that the Maisa Chazaka has to be either B'fnei HaMoicher or HaNoisen, or that the Moicher and Noisen has to tell them Lechazek Uknei. And one of the ways of saying Lechazek Uknei is by giving him Mafteach, or by giving him the Dli of the bear. Halacha Yud. Now, Ketzad HaMagzal Benin the Kola, we're saying no al Gadar Uparatz, Ne'ila Kana, Ken Shemacher Bayis Chotzer, he sold him a house, or a chotzer, and v'hoya pesach pasuach, and the door was open, and v'noal halikech es pesach, he locked the door. He locked the door. It's brought down that it means he locked the door with a lock. Not only he closed it, but he actually locked the lock. And then v'chazru pasche, so he's showing ownership. In other words, he locked it, so now it's secure, and now he's showing bailus. He's chazru pasche. So then, as Areza Hirzik, that's called the Maisa Chazaka V'Kona. Shari Nishtamish B'Shimish HaMeil, he was Nishtamish for himself, a Shimish HaMeil, he locked it, which created that it should be locked, and now he's using it in a way that's a Shimish HaMeil. Now, the reason why he has to go ahead and reopen it, was really the Maisa Kinyan was locking it, because that was the moil. In other words, he locked it, it was open, and he locked it. But if you just lock it without reopening it, so it seems like maybe he's locking it, let's say, Chabalabayas. When he goes ahead and opens it, shows that he's a Psabalabas. So why was he noyal it? If he's the Balabas, why was he noyal it? Because he wanted to be noyal, his item. So the Pasach that was after the Ne'ilah was in order to be Megala that the Ne'ilah was a Maisa Kinyan. So really the Maisa Kinyan was the Ne'ilah. And the Ne'ilah was a Kinyan HaMeil, Dover HaMeil, because it locked up the place. But now that he was a Pasach, so we see he's Balabataving over here. So he wasn't only Noel al Tashlichos of the Balabayas, he was a Noel because of his items. So in Meila, it was a Kinyan HaMeil. That's been a Geir Noel. Ketzad HaMachzik B'Gdira, Kol Shu Kana. A person that was Godar, even if it was a Godar Kol Shu, he's also Kana Kigain. Shahoy Shom Geder, there was a Geder. V'hoyoelim benachas, and it was easy to go on top of this gather and to go over this gather. It was easy to go over it. V'hoisev olav kolshu, and he added a little bit to this gather. V'hishlim alei, and he caused it that it should be 10 tvachim tall. Now that it's 10 tvachim tall, it's not so easy to go over the gather. If once it's 10 tvachim tall, you can't go over it except el bedechik. So therefore, hareza hail v'kana. That's called that you are moil. That was called a gather. V'cheinim hoises sham pirza. There was an opening in this gather. It was hard to get in through this pirza. And and he opened this pirza a little more. And now it's easier to get in. It's easy to get in. So then is harei hail v'kanas. He was male for the field, for this place that he's being koina, through causing that it's easier to go in, and that's koina. So b'kitzur. So there's no gadar uparetz. No means he locked the door, but lock the door is only if he locks the door and then he opens the door. So that shows his locking the door was for himself. And then there's gadar, which means he makes the fence to be in a way that it's not so easy to go over it. He's mashlemit lasara. And then there's paratz, which means there's a pirtzut chulka, and he opens that pirtz a little in order for it to be easier to get in. So that's the noal gadar uparetz, which is a ma'aseh kinyan of chazak. Halacha yud beis. No santzrer v'hoyel Kigoin shechiber behamayim l'soder. In other words, you have water in a field, and that water is coming out of the field. It's coming out of the field, and now you put a stone over there. There was an opening where the water was coming out, and by putting a stone over there, you're preventing that water from being able to come out of the field. So that's you're causing that water which is in the field should remain in the field. So you're helping the field. That's one option. Or you took away a stone, and there was water outside the field, and by you taking away a stone that surrounded the field, that causes that now the water which is outside the field is able to get into the field. So all of these things are helping the field. You're doing something for the field. Is harezach koner, that's a ma'aseh kinyan, that's also a ma'aseh kinyan, and v'chen kol kiyetzbe knows you're doing something which is l'tzerech hasada. That would be something just like we said before that Godar, you made a gather around the field, so you're doing something l'tzerech of the field. You'd made it that it's harder to have access for someone to have access to the field. You have to go b'deich. It's harder to go over it. So the same thing over here. You're helping the field. Either you're making sure that the water stays in the field, or you're making sure that the water gets into the field. Halacha Yud Gimel. Hamecher Soda Lechaveira B'tzat Sodeu. So in other words, that person already owns a field. He owns a field, and next to his field, you're selling him a field which is adjacent to his field. You're not selling it to him. You're giving it to him. And now between the two fields, there's like a little mound of earth which separates the two fields, a little mound of earth which goes across the length of the separation between the two fields. Is kivin shadas yisameitza. Once you stepped down, in other words, you went ahead, you trotted on this meitzer, on this boundary, shebein shtei asadas, and therefore v'nasu shteim kesada achas, so both fields become one field. There's no longer that small separation that was in between the fields. It's kind of your kena. So in other words, the field became part of your field. But if you walk on that field, in other words, you have a field next to it, you're just walking on that field to the length of the field, to the width of the field, so you're walking on the field, you're the balabos, but nevertheless, ein hilach zeh klum. This walking on the field doesn't help. It's not a ma'aseh kinyan. Walking on a field is not a ma'aseh kinyan. A chazak is a ma'aseh kinyan. No, I'll go do a paretz, or flattening out the area between the two fields is also a ma'aseh kinyan. But walking on a field is not a ma'aseh kinyan. V'im shvil shel kram macharle. In other words, normally we say that walking on a field is not a ma'aseh kinyan. And even if you buy a field next to your field and you walk on that field, that's not considered a ma'aseh kinyan. But if we're talking about a path between the vineyards, and you bought a path between the vineyards, so the whole purpose of the path is to be able to walk on the path. That's the only thing you do there. Is hail v'nasel hilu. The whole purpose of this path is to walk on the path. The path is kana behilach. Therefore, you are kana just by walking on this path. Now, v'kam mashir reichav aderech sheikna behiluch. When a person is walking on the path, how wide is the area that he's going to be kana behiluch? Is azoi. There's different pshatim here, and pshat in the Gemara really, and also pshat in Rambam. Imhoye mesuyim b'mechitzis is kana kedei sheyagbia regel v'yaniach regel b'tzida. So there's the amount of space that you put 1 foot and the space between the 2 feet, and also the space in between the 2 feet. When you walk, there's one foot, one step. So when you're walking 1 step, so there's the space of your foot and the next foot, and also the space in between the 2 feet. So that's that area. So again, it's the length of a foot and of 2 feet, so to speak, and not so to speak, the length of 2 feet, and also the space in between these 2 feet. Now, when you're in mechitzis, so we say azay. If a person walks in between the mechitzis, the pashtus is kaino everything in between the mechitzis. That's the pashtus is kaino everything between the mechitzis. Whereas we have a path, and that path is in between mechitzis, so you're kaino between mechitzis. However, if in between the mechitzis is very narrow, and it's less than this area of yagbir regel v'yaniach regel b'tzida, in other words, it's less than that area, it's a very narrow area, so then you extend beyond the mechitzis. In other words, when a person is kaina by walking on this path, he's kaina even beyond the mechitzis, shkedei sheyagbir regel v'yaniach regel b'tzida. That's the pshat. Im hoye mesuyim b'mechitzis, if it was surrounded by mechitzis. In other words, this path had 2 mechitzis on the sides of it. So then is your konik yagbir regel v'yaniach regel b'tzida, even if it goes beyond the mechitzas. However, v'mein sham mechitzas, if there's no mechitzas at all, is konik berechev kedei sheyeh al reishe chavila shel srigim v'yosabei. Whereas if a person would have on his top of his head a bundle of twigs, and he should be able to turn around with it, which is obviously bigger than yagbir regel v'yaniach regel b'tzida. So that's what he's kaina. So when he's being kaina an area which is there's no walls on the sides of it, so then we say he's kaina an area which is big enough that he should be able to turn around in that area while he has a bundle of twigs on his head, in the length of his head, so you should be able to turn around. So it's basically the length of a bundle of twigs. That would be the width of the derech would be the length of a bundle of twigs. That would be if there's no mechitzas. If there are mechitzas, so if there are mechitzas and the mechitzas are bigger, let's say, than the amount that would be 2 feet and the space in between the 2 feet, so then you cane all that area. Masha'inkin, if the part in between the mechitzas is narrower than extending 1 foot in front of another foot, and there's the 2 feet and the space in between the 2 feet, so then you're kaina even beyond those mechitzas, in order you should have enough that there should be space that you should be able to take 1 step. In other words, for 2 feet and the step in between the 2 feet. That's l'chura the pshat. That's one of the pshatim there. Let's read the halacha nachamol. What's the width of the derech that you can't be mechitzas? If the place was mesuyim mechitzas, there was mechitzas on the 2 sides of the shvil. Is kana, how much are you kana of the shvil? Kadesh yagbir regel v'yagniach regel b'tzida, even if it means going beyond the mechitzas. The main sham mechitzas, if there's no mechitzas, so then it's kana berechiv kadesh yer reisha chavila shel srigim v'yosebei, which is a bigger area. It's an area that the width of the shvil is going to be the length of those srigim. Halacha tezvav. Hoisa karka tzchiach sela. You have a piece of karka which is just like a piece of rock. There's no, you can't plant over there. Shein b'lei geder. There's no geder over there. There's no wall around it. B'lei pirtza, so you can't be godar paras. All these dinim don't apply in the no-noal. And also ve'ena bazriya, you can't plant there. Like we'll learn b'hamshach that if you plant in the area, you also can't. It's not shaykh to make a geder there. It's not shaykh to make a pirtza there. You can't plant over there. Is areya chazoka shekena isa? How are you kena? Shtichas peiris ihamodas behemesham, by spreading out peiris on that area or putting behemes there ukiyetze bezeh mishara tashmish. So the Rambam holds when a person uses a field, so that's also a kinyan chazoka. The Ravid right here argues because there's a musik called cheskas sholashonim, which is a different type of a chazaka. A person wants to show ownership. So there's a din. If a person used the field for 3 years, that's a sign of ownership. And even if he doesn't have a raya that he actually bought the field, but the fact that he used the field for 3 years is considered a cheska sholashonim, and therefore that could show ownership, which we'll learn about behemshach. Not here, but in other halachas. Masha'inkin over here we're talking about a ma'aseh kinyan. So the Ravid holds that using the field, and I was planting on this field, using the field is not a ma'aseh kinyan. Ma'aseh kinyan would only be noal, god, or paras, that would be a ma'aseh kinyan. So al derez a hishtamshus with shtichas peiros, a amodas behemesham, according to the Ravid, wouldn't be a ma'aseh kinyan. But the Rambam holds not like that. The Rambam holds that when a person uses a field, that's also a ma'aseh chazaka, which is a ma'aseh kinyan. That's this Rambam over here. So the Rambam says also in the next halacha, chazaka shekena is shtichas apeiros, amodas behemesham ukiyetze bezeh mishara tashmish. In other words, using the field the way an owner would use the field, that would be a ma'aseh kinyan. Halacha tezayin. Hamecher sodel lechaveri. A person sells someone a field, and v'nichnas ba'alikeach v'zorei nori. He went ahead and he planted the field, or he plowed the field, or he gathered the peiros of the tree, a zomrei, or he pruned the tree, which an owner does, is because he made a chazaka, because that's a ma'aseh chazaka. A ma'aseh chazaka is a ma'aseh kinyan, and therefore ein echad yochel lazibay. And over here, derech agav, the Ram doesn't say anything about paying money for the chazaka. In those, you don't have to. Those before we said if you did a star, it has to be that you paid. Those. Less meichem mipnei rasa, there's no kinyan shtar. But chazaka is not like that. But chazaka, if a person made a ma'aseh kinyan chazaka, even though he didn't pay for it, it becomes his. V'cheinem osav hamecher sal shel peiros v'nosan likech. They made up that he's selling the item, and then the Mechir went ahead and he gathered a Sal Shapedis, and he gave it to the Lekech, is also Koner Lekech Miyad B'Chazaka. So the Lekech was Ken Mechazaka, Sharei, Gile Daite, Shehikne Lisad Zu Kinyan Gomer, Venasa Pediser Shalei. There was a Gile Das from the Mechir that he's maknim the field, the Kinyan Gomer, Venasa Pediser Shalei. And this Lashon Rambam could also be help maybe for those people that hold that the gather of a Kinyan is a Gile Das. That's the whole gather of a Kinyan. Whereas the Iker is the Gmiras Das. And the Maisa Kinyan is only in the Gear to show Gmiras Das. So Meil over here, since Lepel, the Mecher went ahead and he was Osaf, Sal Shel Pedis, and he gave it to the Lekech. So Meil Kona Lekech Miyad B'Chazaka. Why? Because there was a Gili Das of the Mecher that he wants to be Maknim Kinyan Gomer. Venasa Pedis Sholei. It's not a Raya Muchrachas. Kosov, there was a Maisa on the Mecher, so that Maisa was the Maisa Chazaka. Halacha Yud Zayin. Hagoy ein a koine b'chazaka ela b'shtar. So a yid has the option of kesef, shtar, and chazaka. When you get kesef, sometimes you also need a shtar, and we learned that the shtar is like a t'nai in the din of kesef, and the kesef could be a pruta. And then shtar, sometimes you also need kesef with the shtar, but there's a kinyan of kesef, and the kinyan of shtar, and the kinyan of chazaka. Mashenken a goy ein a koine b'chazaka. There's no kinyan of chazaka. Ela b'shtaru shekena. And it has to be him the sinas hakesef. He can be koine with shtar, but it also has to be b'tnai that he pays for it. Now the Yisrael habo machmas hagoy, a Yisrael that's bo machmas hagoy, because Mishnah teaches, it means that he's buying it from the goy. Yisrael habo machmas hagoy, the Yisrael is buying it from the goy. I mean, the Gemara comes out, Rashbam teaches Yisrael habo machmas hagoy means he bought it from a goy that bought it from a yid. But over here we're not getting involved the fact that the goy bought it from a yid. Yisrael habo machmas hagoy is hareo kegoy, he has a din like the goy, legabi the kinyan of the goy, memela ve'ina keina el b'shtar. In order for the Yisrael to be able to be koina from the goy is only if he has a shtar. He has a shtar. So he can't be koina from the goy b'chazaka, b'kitzer. He can't be koina from the goy b'chazaka. Kol ha'mechuber lekarka, something that's mechuber lekarka hareo kekarka, and therefore also v'nikna e b'kesef, e b'shtar, e b'chazaka. It's mechuber lekarka, but no longer sorich lekarka. Kein anov ma'im des libotzer. So then harei hein kemetalton lekinyan, and mele then metalton will learn behemshech is not nikne bekesev, and it's not nikne bechazok, and it's not nikne b'shtar. Harei hein kemetalton lekinyan. And v'yeshlem eno. There's another din. The metalton there's a din eno. By karka there's no din eno. It means if you're overcharged by karka, so the din eno doesn't apply. Mashenka my metalton it does apply. So when you're buying anovim, which are imdusli butzer, and those they're grapes which are already ripe, and they're ready to be taken off the vines. So first of all they have a din of metalton, so they can't be nikna with the same kinyonim that karka is nikna. And secondly, there is also a din aino. Halacha yudches. Kshem sha'akarka nikne b'kesev b'shtara b'chazaka, kach schiras ha'karka is also nikne b'kesev levade, e b'shtar levade, e b'chazaka. So when you want to rent karka, so you can rent karka also with kesev levade. Over here, you don't need the shtar. You don't need the shtar. You have kesev levade is enough to rent. E b'shtar levade, or shtar also is enough. E b'chazaka. Ve'in echad mem yochel lazbe once. You rented either with kesef, you paid the schiras, even if there was no shtar, or you have a shtar that the maskir gave a shtar to the seicher of the schiras, or there was a chazaka that the seicher did, is ein echad mem yochel lazir bei. Halacha yutes hamoicher lechaveri eses sodis be'esem medinas. So the din is kiven shehirzik ba'achas man. Once you make a ma'aser kinyan in one of those sodis, even though there's 10 separate places, is kana kulam. Shiokena kulam with the ma'aser kinyan of chazaka. Va'afilo hoisa achas mem hargaveya v'asheni metzula shari tashma shilzu and the tashma shilzu. They have very different types of uses. One is a har and one is a metzula. Nevertheless, the ma'aser kinyan on one works for the other. Aber afal became nevertheless kiven shehirzik ba'achas mem kon hashar. So the Ma'aser Chazaka, we're learning that you buy 10 different sodas in different medinas, even though they have different types of usages, but nevertheless, you make a Ma'aser Kinyan on one, you're kain of the other. Now, by Medvar Mamurim, that with making a Kinyan on one, you can be kain of the other, is Shenosim de Mekulam, you paid for all of that. Now we learned by chazaka you really don't have to pay. In other words, by chazaka you can even if you didn't pay for it. So, but if you're making a chazaka on this field that you're making a chazaka on, so then you don't have to pay for it. Even if you didn't pay for it, you also kaina. Masha'ing, if you're making a chazaka on one field, and through that you're being kaina a field that's elsewhere, so in order to be kaina that field elsewhere, you have to pay for it. Now, l'chur, if you're paying for it, so what do you need the kinyan chazaka? So we're talking about b'eifim kazeh that paying for it is not a ma'aseh kinyan. Whereas paying for it wouldn't be a ma'aseh kinyan, you would maybe need a shtar. But nevertheless, lepeil over here, you're making a chazaka. So by making a chazaka on this field, you're kaina the other field, but to be kaina the other field, you could only be kaina the other field if it was paid for. That's what he's saying. If you're not kaina only connected ma'asav, if you want to be kaina with chazaka, not through making a chazaka on this field, by making chazaka on a different field. If let's say you're giving all as a matana, so then there's no money involved, you doesn't owe any money, so then kol nekulam, and you became all of them. If you want to rent a lot of pieces of karka, is kivan shehirzik ba'achasmem. Once you make a chazaka on one of them, schiris is the chnikne b'chazaka is also kol nekulam. Kolzman aschiris for the whole time that you made up of the schiris. Whereas if you're buying it, so the t'nai is you can't really buy with such type of chazaka unless you paid for it. So even though the paying for it is not really going to buy it, but it's a t'nai in the kinyan of chazaka. Masha'inkin, if you're making a chazaka in something there's nothing to pay for, either a matan or schiros, so then you can make a ma'aseh kinyan with this type of a chazaka. Now, hoye mixes hakarkois b'mecher u'mixosim b'schiros. Some of them you're buying and some of them you're renting. Is kivan sheirzik once you make a ma'aseh kinyan be mechirah be meschiros. Either you made the ma'aseh kinyan in the field that you were buying, or you made the ma'aseh kinyan in the one that you were renting is kanakil. Obviously, the one that you're buying you had to pay for. If you're buying it, you have to pay for it. So you can't make a ma'aseh kinyan for it. In other words, if you're being kaina with a ma'aseh kinyan without making the ma'aseh kinyan in the actual field itself, so you can't be kaina unless you paid for it. But from deswegen, you could with the same kinyan buy some. Some of them you're acquiring as a ma'aseh kinyan that's become yours, and some of them you're becoming a renter of it. The schiris works.